Welcome to the NBA Trades Podcast. I'm your host, Raphael, and today I have a special guest. It's the bro, Anthony, AC Spotlight. Anthony, what's up?
Hey, what's going on, man? A lot of stuff to talk about here today.
Well, there's some NBA stuff going on, some injuries, some trades, and, you can't have an NBA Trades Podcast without an actual trade happening this week, so I'm excited to talk to you about that. So I guess let's get into it. The trade that happened this week, the Clippers got rid of Blake Griffin in a shocker, a move that sort of really shocked the NBA, Twitter sphere, the world. They traded Blake Griffin, Bryce Johnson, Willie Reed to the Detroit Pistons for Tobias Harris, Avery Bradley, Boban Marjanovic, a first-round pick that is top 4 protected from 2018 to 2020. And unprotected 2020, and it's unprotected in 2021, and they also dealt a 2019 second rounder to the Clippers. So, the move really shocked me. I wasn't expecting it to happen, and it's been amazing just to sort of see the reaction around the league and where the Clippers are headed as a franchise after dealing Blake. Will they trade DeAndre? Will they trade Lou Williams? Will they commit to a full-scale rebuild? It seems like that is not necessarily a guarantee. And for the Pistons, it's a move to get back into the playoff race. Obviously, they had lost, I think, 9 in a row before winning last night against Cleveland. And they had fallen 3 games out of the loss column from the 8th seed, the Philadelphia 76ers, and the 7th seed, the Indiana Pacers. Both have 23 losses. So the Pistons are still technically right there. They're not that far out of the playoff race. So it should be interesting to see what happens. What did you think of the trade when it first happened?
Well, when the news circulated on the timeline, it was kind of crazy to think about that, oh, wow, the Clippers really had come to this decision. But then you also find out that they've been thinking about this for the past week or so, and they've kind of been on the 10-yard line as far as getting the deal done that whole day. So when I think about the trade overall, it goes to show you that no matter what a team may say to you or what a team may think of you at the time, and I think we had this discussion during free agency where I never thought that signing Blake Griffin to a 5-year max was a good idea. And, your rebuttal to me was the Clippers felt like they had to do it because they wanted to keep their star and they wanted to remain relevant. But I think the Clippers' fears were, that with and I'm sure that injury that Blake had earlier in the season where he missed some time, and of course a lot of the injuries that have hit the league, and then of course DeMarcus Cousins tearing his ACL. I would have to think that a lot of those things played a part into the Clippers' thinking as far as why they wanted to make this trade now. Because that contract is not going to age well no matter how you try and slice it any type of way. So for the Clippers, I thought it was a good deal and a prudent deal to get out of that contract now, and then you can kind of get started on rebuilding the team, whether they trade DeAndre or Lou Williams at some point remains to be seen. But at least you get started and you avoid having that basically that chain that you're linked to in Blake Griffin. No offense to him, but it is what it is as far as the contract is concerned. Now for Detroit has been one of those franchises that's had a lot of trouble getting free agents to sign there, and they're not exactly what you would call an attractive destination. So the only way that you could get a legitimate player or star in any sense of the word is by trade. So you make that move, and on its face, Detroit seems like the type of team that is content with making first and second rounds and having those type of seasons, I should say. But if you really want to look at the negative, anytime that a GM makes a move out of the fear that they're going to lose their job, usually means ultimately that it's a bad move. And Stan Van Gundy's in a situation where they had lost 8 in a row, they were having another bad season, they were free falling all the way out of the playoff race, and at some point management's going to be looking at him. And I'm sure that was going to be coming up soon, and Detroit had paid him a lot of money to take on the dual role of both president and coach. So, whenever those types of moves happen, it could be, it may not be the best thing for the Pistons long term. And on the court, it's going to be interesting to see how Blake and Andre Drummond fit together. And we can get into the lack of spacing and some of the pieces around them that may not be conducive for success. But on its face, like I said for the Clippers, it's just really difficult for me to validate Blake Griffin as a quote-unquote good move in today's NBA when you consider his injury history and the fact that his contract is gonna hogtie the Pistons for years to come.
Well, so you feel like Stan Van Gundy is on the hot seat, or do you feel like he's more so like trying to get this team, to the playoffs, because sort of like that's been the angle for him since he came there, and obviously it's been, I think, 4 years, and they've made one playoff appearance, got swept by Cleveland. So, like, do you think that it's connected to that?
Yes, I think this was a panic move. I think this was him seeing another season slipping away, and I'm sure. And if I were probably running their organization, they've missed on some picks. They've made a couple of moves that haven't worked out to this point, and you're kind of seeing that they were kind of stuck. They were stuck in the mud. And then there's nothing worse. I remember Steve Kerr saying this. There's nothing worse in the NBA than being stuck, being a mediocre franchise. And I don't know if this changes that much, but this is the type of move that you make when you feel like you need to get out of the mud. And I don't know if this is going to get them out of that, but at least for in Stan's view, I think it probably buys him some more time.
Well, it should be interesting. I mean, like you said, it really does tie them up. I think in terms of salary, when they first before the trade, I mean, they were already a luxury tax team and sort of tied up with Tobias Harris's contract, with Drummond, Reggie Jackson. And so they really didn't have the flexibility to, go after free agents. But also at the same time, they don't really have the cachet as a franchise to sign anyone because, A, they live in Detroit. No shots. No shots to Detroit. And also at the same time, there's not a lot of interest around their team or their star players, as well. So I think looking at the salary figures, in 2000, right now they owe this year, it's $52 million or $53 million tied up in Griffin and Drummond. But I think it's really problematic when you look down 2 years down the line, or even next year. But you look down 2 years down the line, and in the 2019-20 season, they'll owe just about a little bit over $79 million in combination to Blake Griffin, Andre Drummond, and Reggie Jackson. They've made a little bit of some, I wouldn't say they're bad. Well, they are pretty bad decisions when you think about it. Just because, Andre Drummond is getting paid to be a superstar in a way, or not even necessarily a superstar, but close to a superstar. I mean, $23 million in 2 years. He's making upwards of 20, and he is I think what you would call a fringe all-star in the East, especially making it this year after an injury.
Yeah.
To John Wall. So it makes it very scary to be paying someone who's just a very good player, not necessarily a great player. And he's made leaps and bounds as his free throw shooting has improved, his ability to pass out of the high post, and his ability off of those dribble handoffs and find people. It's been very, very good. He has made the improvements that people wanted to see. I think defensively, people still wonder, what is he? Like, he should be better. Reggie Jackson, it's sort of like he's sort of, I wouldn't say a fringe. He's a little bit lower than a fringe all-star. He's sort of like just a solid point guard who's getting paid like an all-star point guard. And it makes it very hard for them to build around that. And then you add Blake, and so you wonder how that's going to fit with the three of them when Reggie Jackson comes back from his sprained ankle injury. They've also invested money in guys who just, flat out have not worked out. John Lure signed a sizable deal with them last year, and he's been out for the season with an ankle problem, so he hasn't played much. I think he played at the beginning, but hasn't played much in the past 2 months. Langston Galloway is sort of in and out of the rotation. He started at one point while Reggie Jackson was out when they were trying to figure out whether it would be better for Ish Smith to come off the bench in his normal role. And Langston Galloway has been sort of a mixed bag. He hasn't been a surefire player. They've missed on draft picks like Stanley Johnson has shown flashes of his ability to defend, but he hasn't shot well and he hasn't really figured it out offensively. Luke Kennard is still up in the air. A lot of people sort of wonder if he's more than just an average role player. And so and Henry Ellenson too has not really worked out as well as a lottery pick. And so the Pistons are in a very tough spot because they haven't drafted well. I think much was made this week of how Devin Booker and Donovan Mitchell were available in the drafts that they took Stanley Johnson and Luke Kennard. So a lot of people wonder they probably would be better if they would have drafted a lot better. They've missed on some mid-level type of free agent signings. And then they've also re-signed these guys because they really have no choice but to re-sign Andre Drummond and Reggie Jackson. They're the two best players at before Blake came here. So it's going to be really tough for them or it limits their ceiling. I mean, at best, they really, like, if everything works out and they're able to steal a shooter through a minimum level contract or draft well in the middle of the first round, at best, the Pistons might be able to get 50 wins at best if everything works out. But that's really if everything works out. And so limits their ceiling with this type of group. And you wonder, like you said, Blake and his fit around Andre Drummond, like, how is that going to work? They both can pass, so you feel like it could work. But you wonder if it will work, what its ceiling is. Like, they could get some wins, but can they really compete with some of the better teams in the East, or even just the better teams in the NBA with that limited spacing? Because also I think the bigger problem is that a lot of people have talked about Blake's shooting, and he's 34% this year, and he's shooting average for his position at the three, or a little bit better than average for his position specifically, but they don't really have great shooting around him or Andre Drummond in the backcourt or on the wing. And so for that, I think that's the bigger issue, is that you can't really do much if the paint is clogged if your key rotation players are Stanley Johnson and Reggie Jackson. That's going to make it really tough. And then your best shooters like Luke Kennard or Langston Galloway at times are very good three-point shooters, but they haven't really proven that they can do anything else or be capable. A move that just sort of was meant to shake up the foundation of that franchise years ago when the Reggie Jackson-Andre Drummond pairing led them to 45 wins. And they've headed towards not necessarily greatness, but respectability. But last year was disappointing. They missed the playoffs. And this year they started off well, but are now headed down the same path as last year. So,
right.
Yeah. So right. I don't.
Yeah. So it's good. I figure, the funny thing is, you mentioned Blake shooting from three, and he's gotten the attempts up, but I would figure that most guys would still situations where I feel like both Griffin and Drummond are gonna be here after Stan is gone, because I feel like Stan is not gonna last too much longer over there.
You really think? Well, what?
Yeah, the thing I would say is, like, I feel like the odds are that they're not going to succeed at the level that you might think that I don't know if the fit is going to be great, and of course they just don't have enough talent around them, or any of those teams of Boston, any of those teams that are whatever they can do in the next couple of years with limited flexibility remains to be seen. But if I had to just go the odds are this team is not going to be that good. So. Yeah, it's a starry name, and it gets headlines, and maybe it'll actually fill that arena, which is usually almost always half empty these days.
I know those red seats. Those red seats are a killer.
Yeah, they're pretty bad. But yeah, hopefully they get some notoriety from it. But otherwise, I mean, maybe they're content with. I'm sure they're content probably with being like the Joe Johnson Atlanta Hawks, but. Overall, as far as what does this do, might not matter. And that's the funny thing, because if you take us back to 2015, the 2015 playoffs, where Blake Griffin is dominating San Antonio and he is dominating Houston to a 3-1 lead in that second round series, who would have known that just a couple of years later that we would be here, where he's on the Detroit freaking Pistons?
Well, I think Joe Johnson's Hawks are disappointed in that comment, because I don't even think this team is close to Joe Johnson's Hawks.
Well,
that's the funny thing.
That's crazy to think. You're probably right about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that team was a lot better. I mean, it had a better team. I mean, it was just a better composed team. Yeah. I don't know. It's gonna be tough. So I guess we'll flip it over to the Clippers side. We talked enough about those darn Pistons. The Pistons, the Clippers get Avery Bradley, Tobias Harris, Boban Marjanovic, and obviously I think the key thing is the 2 picks, but obviously the first round pick is at best is going to be a late lottery pick most likely, and they get a second round pick too. So with the way that the Clippers are sort of headed, it makes you wonder what's going to happen with DeAndre Jordan, what's going to happen with Lou Williams. Will they focus more on rebuilding with these younger guys and for the rest of this year, or are they still interested in competing for that playoff spot? Because they're not that far out. Obviously they lost yesterday, and I think they're only like a game or 2 out of it, but their team is sort of is confusing now too, because of having Tobias on the team and also having Danilo Gallinari. They're both sort of stretch 4 type of guys. They play the same position, and Gallinari's presence doesn't make as much sense when they first signed him, and it's just a lot of questions. Avery Bradley is heading into free agency, and you have to wonder, will the Clippers try and trade him before the deadline next week? It leaves a lot to wonder, and it leaves also a lot of pathways to wonder what they're going to do down the road. Will Doc Rivers stay with the team because of his famed history of not wanting to be on losing teams or not coaching losing teams, based off of his moments with the Boston Celtics after they traded Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce? I'm really interested to see what path they head on. Obviously, the LeBron thing too became a big discussion, that they're interested in trying to get on his short list of teams that he might want to sign with. What do you see the Clippers doing here?
Wow, and you really hit the nail on the head in all of those vantage points, because now of course Jerry West is a consultant for the Clippers, and Lawrence Frank is kind of running the organization at this point. So this kind of feels like it's more their move than it is the Doc Rivers move. So how much longer, regardless of whatever Doc says, is he going to be around is going to be an interesting question after this season. Whether there might be something that changes there, because I feel like there's a lot more changes to come with this team. After Joakim Noah and Luol Deng, I would say Gallinari right now probably is one of the third most unmovable contract in the league at this point.
Wait, what about Mozgov and Evan Turner and all of those guys from that one year?
Yeah, that's like
Well, it's all those guys and then Gallinari. It's all those guys and then
What
Gallinari.
were you gonna say?
I was gonna say it's all those guys from that one specific free agency year to the summer of 2000 and what was it, 15 or 16? The summer of 2016.
Yeah.
Summer 16, like Drake. Those guys, and Chandler Parsons too probably is on the. All those guys and then Gallinari's right after. He's the worst.
Yeah,
He's
but
the worst non
considering
2016
the fact that
one.
he's a part of that group, so
Yeah.
because of the overlap with him and Tobias, I feel like there may be more moves to come there. I just don't know how they get that type of stuff done. I want to see what happens with DeAndre, what they could get for him. Because if you just put something realistic in terms of what the Clippers are actually going to do, I just can't see them offering DeAndre a max contract. It just wouldn't make sense. So I could see him moving on in the off season if they allow him to become a free agent. But the odds are, I would guess that they would try and move him before the deadline. And Lou Williams is another one. What can they fetch for him? Can they be like the Lakers and get a first round pick for him? That'll be another question there. So I feel like this is just the beginning for the Clippers in terms of just getting themselves to a place where they can actually rebuild the team and get out of that hard cap near the apron situation that they've been in for the last 2 or 3 years. And the Blake move, gets that started initially, but they have just so much more to do. So, and then you get the idea, back to my original point, that the organization is kind of headed in a different direction, and the fact that Steve Ballmer signed off on this move will lead you to believe that he's on that same wavelength with both Lawrence Frank and Jerry West, and we'll see if it's Doc Rivers. But I think it's the jury is still out on what this team is going to look like probably after the deadline, because I could just see there'll be more moves, and they'll probably get themselves out of the playoff mix for the rest of the season. One would have to assume, but right now, as presently constituted, their roster could still compete for a playoff spot if they stay pat. But, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, it's weird. Since Blake came back, the team has had a 3.1 net rating. Or no, the team has had a 2.9. He's had a 3.1 net rating overall. And you have to wonder if maybe they felt at the same time like he hasn't really, they haven't been balling out on the court just because he's on the court. He has a 0.8 net rating all season, and the team as a whole has a 0.4 net rating. So he hasn't really made, a huge impact or a big difference on the court. Obviously, he's still a great scorer. His rebounding is down, but he's also become a great playmaker, and he's shot better from three this year. I think 34%. So maybe part of me does wonder if maybe they felt like, hey, it's not like he's making that huge of a difference, and paying him, an exorbitant amount of money, with having about $144 million left to pay him after this year. It would be really difficult to just keep on somebody who's not making that big of a difference, despite his numbers overall looking like, his counting statistics looking nice. Avery Bradley has been a very bad, as most people have noted, this year.
Yeah.
They were 3-17 in his last 20 games that he played in. So I think he missed a stretch, and they played better with Luke Kennard and Galloway, taking up his minutes. He has a negative 9.3 net rating overall for the team when he's on the court. It's been a struggle. Tobias Harris, in a weird way, is you could sort of compare to Blake in that he's shooting a career-high number of 3-point attempts. He's really spacing the floor. It hasn't really led to much success. What's the like we talked about, and you just mentioned like the team and whatnot. Do the Clippers have a path to going after somebody in free agency, or do you think it's just they should just commit to like a full scale rebuild and just start over and get rid of these guys? Or do you think that they should be trying to pursue LeBron and trying to, go down this whole pipe dream stuff that doesn't really, to me at least, doesn't really make sense?
I mean, if LeBron ever showed any type of interest,
yeah,
and if you get the sign from his camp that he'd be willing to talk to you, then
you have to do it.
Yeah, then you kind of have to, because it's LeBron. So you still have to put your ducks in a row for that. But if it's the case that you see that it's clear that LeBron's not interested, then I go for the full scale rebuild. Because at this point, realistically, Golden State, with what they've built and just the idea that they can win another 1 or 2 championships with this core, and then allegedly get other stars to go there after, to kind of like refresh the core in a year or two, I think I would set myself up and kind of rebuild. And I know that's very hard because it's just not the easiest thing to do. There are so many different articles and so many different teams that have gone through these same types of situations that have a hard time of, they just hold on too long instead of just going the full way of rebuilding. And there are a lot of different teams in the league who are still going through that situation now. While they have some young players and some type of talent, they're still not like fully committing to, that you get the sense that you always hear we want to be competitive, or you hear from the star saying, well, we should be a team that should try and make the playoffs and stuff like that. But as far as the Clippers are concerned, I think they should just completely rebuild, start fresh, and eventually get it. And if you have the right people in your organization that are going to make sound and prudent decisions, then you restack the cupboard, you get draft picks, you get yourself in a situation where either you could be rebuilt through the draft, or you have enough assets that you can make a trade for a star at some point. So that's the way I would go if I were them.
Word. So, okay, so we talked about these two teams, and we'll see what happens with them. So, this past week has been pretty bad in terms of NBA injuries. DeMarcus Cousins out for the season with a torn Achilles or ruptured Achilles. Andre Roberson, ruptured patellar tendon, out for the season. Kevin Love, out for 2 months with a broken left hand. John Wall, arthroscopic knee surgery, out for about 2 months, 6 to 8 weeks, both given that time frame. You have the Pelicans, who sort of were making a run and still positioned in a favorable place right now, but they've lost 2 in a row. You have the Thunder, who are right now, I think in fifth place, and they're moving on up, and Andre Roberson was definitely a blow to them. And then you have on the east side, Cleveland still positioned at 3rd, but facing Miami tonight, and Miami is right behind them half a game. And then you have John Wall, the Wizards, placed at, I think it was, they were with the Pacers and the Bucks. They're like 6th, but it's sort of like, I mean, they're 5th right now, but it's sort of like they're like 5, 6, 7 somewhere. They're like, you know what I mean? Like they're 5th place right now, but really it's like the Bucks are like percentage points behind them. So it's gonna be interesting to see how these 4 teams sort of respond to these injuries. Obviously, Cleveland and Washington's are not as long term. These guys will be back before the playoffs or right before the playoffs start. Do you see any of these 4 teams making moves to try and at least bolster the rotation while these guys are out? Obviously in the Pelicans and Thunder place or position, they need guys to keep them going for the rest of this season as Boogie and Roberson will not be back. Do you see any trades? Obviously, we saw Nikola Mirotic almost got traded to the Pelicans from Chicago for a first rounder. Have issues with his team option. Because they don't want to add on that additional salary while they're still entertaining the idea of re-signing DeMarcus Cousins. I think Mirotic would really help them. Him and Anthony Davis together would be a very nice pairing. Do you see any of these moves happening, or any moves happening for these teams?
I think the Pelicans are going to definitely try and make a move. I think they want to make the playoffs. I think they want to kind of just prove to Anthony Davis that, hey, we're still trying to be competitive at this point. Even though I would say that Boogie injury basically, and this is a really, really hot take, but that Boogie injury assured to me that in the next year or two they're going to trade Anthony Davis. I think they're going to be forced to. They're not going to have a choice, because the odds of Boogie coming back from that injury and being 100% and being what he was, I don't know if I'm going to see that, especially from a big man. That's going to be very difficult. People can talk about whether his athleticism has anything to do with his effectiveness, but I would just say for me, he's not going to be the same player that he was at this point coming off of that type of injury. So it's going to lead them to be stuck in a position where they got to figure out, do we sign this guy knowing that Anthony Davis has already formed a relationship with him and hoping for his production to remain the same, and then you sign him, and then he's not that guy, and then you're stuck in the same place that you've been, being mediocre, and then you have to trade Anthony Davis. Or somebody else decides to sign Boogie Cousins instead of them, and they balk at it. They get too scared of the injury, and then you're stuck with not being able to add anybody around Anthony Davis. So therefore, you don't want to lose him. So therefore, you end up trading him. I just feel like at this point, there's no way that the Pelicans don't trade Anthony Davis before he becomes a free agent. I just don't see it happening at this point. But that's one thing. As far as Cleveland is concerned, I want to see them make a move. I think the odds are they're going to definitely try and make a move. But the problem that they have right now is their front office is so screwed up. Every story that you read about Dan Gilbert and whether he's involved in running the team and basketball decisions and all this other stuff, and they're in lab and probably may overvalue it to the point where they don't want to put it on the table due to the fact that LeBron hasn't committed to them. So they're always going to be stuck in this, well, we can't make this just based off of the fact that they're just fearful of giving up that pick. Feel like they should or want to make a move. But I don't know if I trust their front office to even have the intelligence to get through that. So I don't know if that's going to happen.
Oh, the shady comment.
Concerned with Andre Roberson, that's interesting. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure what they could give up, anything substantial to get something back in return. I don't know what deal is out there for a perimeter guy that can make a difference on that team, because you're basically looking for defense at this point, because it's just you have your three guys, the three guys that you rely on for scoring, plus Steven Adams. So I don't know what defensive wing is out there that can have the same type of impact that Andre Roberson has. So the likelihood of the Thunder making a deal, I don't think it's that high.
Yeah, I know. They don't have a lot of flexibility in terms of, draft picks to just throw away for a rental or whatnot. So it's going to be really interesting to see if they are able to do anything or if they just keep it going from inside. I mean, the thing that scares me just watching them is that their bench, they play those 5-man lineups, especially in the fourth quarter, the beginning of the fourth, the beginning of the second, and it just goes nowhere and they can't score, and you're just waiting for when Russ or PG or Carmelo is going to come in, or Steven Adams, somebody to just, do something. Yeah, because
that's a weird one. Why he's playing 5-man bench units that can't score.
Raymond Felton pick and roll and, going nowhere. So it's going to be interesting. What are you expecting for this trade deadline? Do you want a lot of moves, or are you like, that Blake Griffin trade was enough?
The funny thing was that it's already made the trade deadline interesting, because I didn't think anything substantial was going to happen. I feel like the Bulls are definitely going to try and move Mirotić now with him and his option and that whole situation. That may muck things up in terms of what they can do. I mean, it already has. So that's one thing you got to watch out for. It's pretty clear that the Clippers probably are still not done. They're probably going to make more moves. So I would suspect they would make another move. Can Memphis get into contend? May be interested, and how much of the cost are they going to be willing to take
Nothing.
in terms of surrendering a first round pick? Which
I
don't
can't
know.
see it.
If I was any team, I would do that. I mean, I feel like something is going to happen. They're now 29-20. Yeah, they're 29-20, and they're a half game ahead of Miami for fourth. And a lot of these teams are kind of starting to get bunched up with them. So in the next couple of games before next week, if we see that it's dire, so this Heat Cavs game is actually interesting tonight from that standpoint. If Cleveland continues to struggle and we continue to hear stuff, then we may see something else. But I feel like there'll be a couple of moves. Maybe not like heavy moves, but I mean, odds are, I would say they're going to try and move DeAndre, but what the market is for DeAndre, I'm just not sure.
Yeah, me neither. And I think, like getting back to the Tyreek one, it's just so difficult to expect a first-round pick for a rental that, he's a rental, but also at the same time, you don't have his bird rights. So you can't sign him unless you have cap space. So, or re-sign him if you have cap space. So it's like a clear-cut rental. Like, Tyreek is trying to get the bag. This is his comeback year after, a couple years of dealing with injuries or just not performing up to the standards that, he possibly had. He's shooting a career high from the three-point line. Obviously, with Memphis, they don't have a lot of shot creation or guys who can handle the ball and make plays for other people. So he's sort of taking the lion's share of that and of those duties and those responsibilities. And he's definitely put himself in a position to make some money this offseason. But if you're acquiring him at this point, you have to wonder if you're going to re-sign him. You're going to have the cap space available to re-sign him in the offseason. But second of all, you have to wonder, is it worth a first-round pick? A lot to think about. Nikola Mirotic too. I think he'd really help somebody. So, any other trade stuff? I don't think there is any. It's been pretty quiet ever since the Blake trade, and now I'm sounding very spoiled because the Blake trade happened 2 days ago.
Yeah, it was huge. Huge deal.
Today is January 31st, so the trade deadline is 8 days away from today. Next Thursday, January 8th? So, it should be a really exciting time. Anthony, thank you for joining the NBA Trades podcast. Kobe.
Thanks for letting me come on and talk about this trade. It was very interesting. And appreciate everybody for checking out the poetry book Selfish, available on Amazon. Need those book reviews, so if you have the book already, write a review if you can. And then I just started a new podcast talking about the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The podcast is titled Marvel Cinematic University with my guys, Jerome Chang and Jake Christie. We're actually going to record a new episode later this week, so that should be fun, reviewing all the movies as we get closer to Infinity War. You can follow me on Twitter at ACSpotlight95 with an S. And as always, thank you, Ralph. I appreciate it, bro.
You got that self-promotion locked down. But yeah, I was going to talk about Black Panther since it's coming out next month.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the movies that we're going to go out of order, because we were planning to just go in order straight to Infinity War and after that. But since Black Panther's coming out soon, we'll probably do a pod out of order to discuss that movie. And of course, there's been a lot of discussion of how good the movie has been from the red carpet premiere. So there's a lot of hype around it. There's a lot of hype out of the soundtrack.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm definitely going to check it out. Well, I know I'm going to check it out. But yeah, it's going to be very good. I'm excited for it too. And I guess I got to check out what that track listing is. I know Kendrick is executive producing it. So
yeah, and he's on a lot of it.
Okay. So then it's like a Kendrick album.
Yeah, Kendrick album, basically.
Kendrick and Friends. Okay,
yeah.
So I'll definitely check it out. Okay, so this is the NBA Trades podcast. You can always Follow me on Twitter, NBA_trades. Like the page on Facebook, NBA Trades. So you can also subscribe to the podcast. We're on iTunes under NBA Trades Podcast. We're also on Stitcher, Google Play. It's also on YouTube, people. So there are many avenues to listen to this. So, and it's also on the website, nbatrades.tumblr.com. So you can always check it out. And peace.
Peace.